Hello folks, my name is Dustin Jones, founder of the Senior Rehab Project. Very excited for you to hear today's episode. I was able to attend the CrossFit Level 1 seminar recently, and at the end of that amazing weekend, I was able to sit down with a few very special people to talk about the future of healthcare. So the guest for today's interview, first is Dr. Julie Foucher, Urcuyo. Many of you know her as Julie Foucher. She is a family medicine resident, second year currently at the Cleveland Clinic, but she's most well known as a CrossFit Games competitor. So she somehow managed to finish top 5 in the CrossFit Games while going through medical school, which completely blows my mind that she was able to do that. So very fit individual, but very smart individual as well. She's also on the CrossFit Level 1 seminar training staff, so she teaches the L1 as well, and she taught the course that I went to. She also is the host of the Pursuing Health podcast, very, very popular podcast, a wide range of guests from CrossFit Games athletes to physicians doing pretty interesting research. But she's been a pretty loud voice in terms of promoting CrossFit for health, not just performance, but just overall health. And we'll get into that in this interview. So that's Julie Foucher. Her husband, Dani Urcuyo, is a family medicine physician, so he's 1 year ahead of her, and he works with SteadyMD. So SteadyMD is kind of like a telehealth company where you can work with a physician that really understands your interests and what you value. So let's say you are an avid runner, you can actually work with a primary care physician that is a runner, that is an accomplished runner and works with runners, that understands what you're going through and isn't going to tell you just to stop running if you have X, Y, and Z condition, but they'll work with you, to get to the root problem. So he works with SteadyMD, focuses on functional fitness, and is also very interested in functional medicine. He says he has 2 goals: bring functional medicine to primary care and help people live healthy and fulfilling lives. He's an avid CrossFitter as well. Awesome guy, and we recorded this episode in his office, Black Flag Athletics, the gym where they both go to. Third was my wife, Dr. Meghan Jones. She's an emergency room physician. She's about a few years out of her residency training from Ohio State, and obviously I'm biased, but she's probably the coolest one in the room. And then second to her, I think, is our daughter, Lucy Lenore Jones. So our daughter, we weren't able to get any childcare, so she ended up in the interview, and you'll hear her several times throughout the podcast. Now, just to preface, the audio, the first 10 minutes is okay, but it's not great, but you can get through it. Once you get past that 10-minute mark, you're good to go. You're going to hear Lucy. She'll babble, she'll cry a little bit, but I've done my best to kind of edit that out or lower the volume so we don't make your ears bleed. So expect that, but it's an awesome interview. We talked about functional medicine, what it is not. We talked about the implications of CrossFit Health, CrossFit's recent initiative to really pursue kind of the more broad public health sector versus, really pinning themselves to be working with kind of the elite performers, which is a stereotype that a lot of people have of CrossFit. We also talked about just kind of how they perceive physical therapists and rehab professionals and how we can better work together. So kind of a broad ranging conversation, but we really talked about the future of healthcare and what it's going to look like for physicians or for physical therapists. So I really enjoy it. So without further ado, Drs. Julie Foucher, Drs. Dani Urcuyo, Dr. Meghan Jones, and Lucy Lenore. We're here. Black Flag Athletics.
Yes, sir.
I'm with Dani Urcuyo.
Nailed it.
Nice.
Urcuyo. All right,
Yeah.
we're at Black Flag Athletics. I'm here with Dani Urcuyo, Julie Foucher, my lovely wife, Meghan Jones, and we got Lucy Lenore over here, the lovely 5-month-old. So, real quick, what do you do? What's your profession?
I'm a family medicine doctor and have a special interest in functional medicine.
Okay.
And I am in residency for family medicine, and I also used to compete in CrossFit.
Okay.
And I'm an emergency physician. Been practicing a couple years in Lexington, Kentucky.
Lucy, she specializes in crapping her pants and
Just getting started. Just getting
and
started.
reading. Okay. All right. So, we want to have this conversation to kind of bridge the gap between the interdisciplinary or the team that we work with, but we hardly ever talk to. Just so the PT crowd can get your all's perspective, and also, just have this as more of a conversation. So if y'all have any questions, I could, be the PT in the room and answer them. So more of a dialogue than anything. But I first want to ask, why family medicine? Why primary care? Because I remember when my wife was in medical school, you have the rank list and what do I want to specialize? And you have all these things that you're weighing, and, you could work, 4 times a month and make $500,000 if you do this one specialty, or blah, 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 blah. There's all these benefits to certain specialties. Some have easier lifestyles, some have harder. And there's different stereotypes associated with them. But why family medicine for you all when you did that rank list?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to start?
I'll start because I decided first.
Oh, all right.
So even though he got there first. So I actually, when I started med school, I thought that family medicine was the one thing I did not want to do. I thought I had tons of interest, but I thought I could rule that out because I thought it would be a little bit too broad. I didn't think it was going to be as interesting, and I thought I really wanted to become a specialist in one area of the body and know that really well and kind of be an expert in that. But right before medical school and then in my first couple years of med school was when I started getting into CrossFit, and it was actually when I took my first level 1 seminar, just like we did this weekend, and I heard laid out for me the sickness, wellness, fitness continuum and the real purpose behind CrossFit and why we want to maximize our fitness and how that is so important in our health. And I realized that family medicine was the way to accomplish that. That's where you really get to develop longitudinal relationships with patients, and you get to be the first ones that they go to oftentimes. And you can really work on prevention of disease. And then once I got into my rotations, I realized I really did like working with patients more on that than I did seeing them in the hospital when they were really sick and it was almost too late. And so that is kind of what brought me into family medicine. And then on top of that, I just like the idea of working with whole families. So I never, I loved all my rotations. I loved working with kids. I loved working with elderly patients and everything in between. So it was just a really good fit for me.
Okay, and you just copied her.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I was like, that seems cool. Let's do that.
Even though I followed him through all of med school residency.
No, I decided on family medicine pretty late in the game, maybe a year out from applying. So I started medical school.
Less than that.
Was it less?
Yeah, it was close to the end.
Like January before you switched.
It was very, maybe it was a little bit, It was really down to the wire. But I originally wanted to do transplant surgery, so I ended up doing a lot of research, got some funding to do a year-long project, and then everything was geared towards that. I would kind of stay up all night with the transplant team, go on procurements, and that was what I wanted to do. And then I really started to recognize that, I wanted to prevent the stuff that these people were suffering from. So that kind of was in the back of my mind, and then I kind of looked at ENT because there was a little bit more longitudinal relationship to some degree. And then we went on this big trip with my family and Julie's sister. We went to Nicaragua, where my dad's from. And I don't know why I didn't recognize this earlier, but it's probably just because now I was in medical school, where I saw a lot of folks suffering from the exact same diseases that people were suffering from here. Diabetes, high blood pressure. Not necessarily so much infectious disease as you would suspect, but more of these lifestyle-related diseases. So then I thought, well, if I really want to make an impact, that's really what I need to do. So then I started exploring internal medicine versus family medicine. Then finally I did an acting internship, kind of like an audition in family medicine. And I thought it was really fun, and I kind of just felt it was the right thing. And Julie had said, wow, I've never seen you happier. This is probably something you should consider. And then that's how I kind of decided. And that didn't happen until pretty late in the game in terms of medical school. Yeah.
And you mentioned the lifestyle balance, so obviously different specialties have a different balance for your lifestyle. And for Dani, he realized that transplant surgery, that was going to be pretty much all he could do because it was just so consuming. Whereas family medicine allows us to have a much better balance in terms of doing things outside of medicine or being able to work on these other projects to try to help people in different ways.
And integrate my passion for CrossFit too. Right. I was trying to figure out how I was going to combine that with surgery. That not very easy to do. So yeah.
Why emergency medicine?
I think I was very similar. Like I liked a lot of different things about my rotations in med school, and had more difficult of a time deciding that I thought I would. I had really liked peds, and I really liked some women's health stuff, and I liked doing procedures, but not being in the OR all day. And I think finally, it must have been like very late third year, I did like a little elective in emergency medicine and found that it was kind of combining little bits of everything I liked. Like I got to see every age group, I got to do some procedures, I really also enjoyed that you couldn't turn anyone away. Like you had to see everybody walk through the door, and it's like it was kind of a very almost like poetic thing that was kind of treating everybody on the margins, and whether you had insurance or not, or referrals or not. And yeah, I just felt like it kind of combined all of that. And I was doing a lot of global health at the time, or I had gone on some trips and was interested in that. I felt like it kind of gave a good basis of procedures and knowledge base to go do that flexibility to leave and do those types of trips as well.
Yeah. And I don't want to go into this topic at all, but I mean, as it turns out, you may be functioning as a primary care physician, just with how the ER is utilized and whatnot. So there's probably more similarities in some ways between what y'all do and differences. So
it's true.
So we are at Black Flag Athletics. It is a gym, a health hub, a doctor's office, a PT clinic, I think. So we had a CrossFit Level 1 seminar this weekend. Julie helped teach. Dani was doing work, looking at imaging and talking to people and all that fun stuff. So one thing that has brought me here has been the CrossFit Health Initiative. So, you all are in primary care. Meghan is to some extent, whether you like it or not.
You're in primary care, let's be honest.
So for those that have not heard about this, how would you describe CrossFit Health? So if you could describe it, Julie, and then Dani, if you could just kind of give people a picture of what the potential impact that this could have in the healthcare system, but then just our society in general.
Sure.
Definitely.
So first.
So CrossFit has always been about helping the average person become healthier. It's always been this program for the general public to try to do functional movements, to try to eat better, and support improvement in their health markers and their fitness markers. What it has become in the past 10 years or so with the growth of the CrossFit Games is that the focus has been a lot on the competitive aspect of CrossFit, and often that's how people are first introduced to it because they see something about the CrossFit Games and they think that's all it is. So starting about 1 year ago, Greg Glassman, who's the founder of CrossFit, created a division called CrossFit Health, where basically he really wanted to put the focus back on health and on the average person and helping to fight chronic disease. And this kind of came about because through the years, CrossFit has also become involved in a lot of different legal battles. One from a research study that falsified some injury data about participants that were doing CrossFit. And then in the process of fighting some of these legal battles, CrossFit basically realized, and Greg realized, how corrupt a lot of our organizations are. Our food and beverage industry, how much a lot of research is being influenced by this industry. There's a lot of conflicts of interest. And so they wanted to educate the general public about all these conflicts. They want to try to get, the food and beverage industry out of research. And so that's a big part of what CrossFit Health is working on. The other part that they initiated last year was to try to educate as many physicians as possible about what CrossFit is truly all about and to network those physicians in order to try to get the people who need CrossFit the most into CrossFit gyms so that it's not intimidating, so that people who have chronic diseases who can benefit from exercising and can benefit from improving their diet can have access to this. So last year, I believe they did about 6 CrossFit Level 1 seminars, exactly the same as we did this weekend, but they were held in California at CrossFit headquarters, specifically for physicians. And as a result of that, there have come a lot of other conferences and discussions. So last year, before the CrossFit Games, there was a health conference where CrossFit brought in speakers talking about a lot of these issues about some of the problems with our medical research and the way it's interpreted, talking about, I don't know, who were some of the speakers. So they had Gary Taubes as one of the speakers. Who else spoke? Axel Pfluger, who is a brilliant nephrologist, internal medicine doctor, and he previously, in his previous career in Germany, was also a cardiothoracic surgeon, but he did a ton of research. Oh, I'm sorry. He did a ton of research that basically looked at, he was a nephrologist. He had this huge registry of data at Mayo Clinic, and he looked at the impact that the drugs and the interventions were having on people with chronic kidney disease.
Yeah.
And turns out the impact that those were having were so minuscule in comparison to exercise and nutrition, which we know, right? And he said, well, if this is how we can actually help these people, then why aren't we doing it? And how can we implement it? And that's how he got connected with CrossFit. So it's bringing a lot of smart people together to try to rethink and reimagine the way we are delivering health and preventive care.
Right.
I think that's pretty much. And so now then this year, January 1st, the CrossFit.com website has kind of changed its focus. And now if you go to that website, you'll see that it's really focusing a lot more on elderly population and overweight population. They're posting a lot of interesting research and articles about some of these problems with our healthcare system.
Yeah. So for viewers or listeners, if you want a good illustration of what Julie just said, if you go, I haven't seen if it's on the news site, but if you go to CrossFit.com and hit on the health tab, the mess, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's amazing illustration that you could stare at for probably 6 straight hours and not even grasp the weight of it. So yeah, it's a really interesting initiative. Big difference even before January 1, but January 1 was boom, like new website, new posting. I mean, it almost, the first week almost looked similar to our feed where we were doing squats and deadlifts and just some of these different things with people that are homebound, for example. And that was really cool to see. So what impact do you see this having realistically, not to get like too hyped up and unrealistic, but what is this important? Is it going to be effective? Like what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think certainly it's going to be effective. It's going to be a big movement, really, not just something that stays isolated, I think, to hopefully just to CrossFit. But right now we're in this initial stage where we're just coming together. We're starting to recognize that, you're not alone as a physician that believes in the CrossFit methodology and in the power of lifestyle factors in being able to modify a disease course more so than a lot of the medications that we have. And out of that, we'll see what comes. A lot of things are already happening on a small scale. Physicians are networking. They're potentially wanting to open up practices together with the same idea of using lifestyle first approach. I think what's going to be very exciting and where I see the next step is being able to bridge this medical world with the fitness world and having it be more of a continuum, not these two silos, the fitness field and then the medical field.
Oh, yeah.
And I think once that happens and we have a model and a community where this is just commonplace and where CrossFitters just expect that, I think you'll see this beyond the CrossFit community. Everyone's looking for the same thing. They're looking for physicians that understand lifestyle, that understand the power of community, that understand the power of food. I think we'll see more people come into this kind of community, really, and we'll probably see CrossFit grow as a result of that. But I think we'll see this whole philosophy grow too.
Yeah. What has me excited was what Doug Sakaris, he was like the lead instructor for this weekend. His last words were to be inclusive. So he mentioned the shift from big CrossFit to, admitting initially we were attracting the high performance kind of hardcore people on the fringes. And now there's a strategic move to broaden that impact, to grow it. And we need to be inclusive in those communities. So when you see that person walk in that may be overweight or has never worked out before or has X, Y, and Z chronic condition, which a lot of times you can't see that, but we need to be inclusive. And I freaking love that. Because every time you end a weekend like that note at the very final note is the thing that sticks into your head more than anything. And he chose that very precious time to say that, that was very, very cool. I know. Yeah.
but it's so true. And I think we're so well positioned to do it. I think that it's going to take time because we have this shift to make. But think about it, we have 15,000 affiliates around the world that already know how to teach people how to move. And even in those affiliates, there's already at least a few people in each affiliate who've come in very overweight or maybe had some chronic diseases. But think about how much courage it takes for someone to walk in the door. I mean, even for just a regular person who maybe was an athlete like 10 years ago to walk in the door, it's really scary and intimidating. So if we start to break down those barriers where we can get people in the door and we can help people get the confidence to want to make a change, then we're going to start seeing that as commonplace in all these gyms, and we're like set up to serve those people.
Yeah. I was scared of that. We both were scared of that.
Yeah.
We were collegiate athletes and we considered ourselves to be
right?
healthy at least.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So why is CrossFit Health intriguing to you? Like, what about it? And you can give some background too, because I don't think I've told Julie or Dani just about kind of why we're here, basically.
You mean as far as like with like CrossFit and
CrossFit Health and just, I mean, back in October, November, when you're like, hey, look at.
Because I think we always kind of were, I felt like CrossFit adjacent. Like we kind of always had a general understanding of what was going on and kind of followed it peripherally, and lived in Columbus, Ohio, like Rogue's big headquarters. So definitely kind of had heard about it. And but I was in residency at the time. And so it was like, Dustin was like packing my lunches and cooking me dinner. So it was hard to think about starting something new. And I think after having Lucy, wanting to I just missed, I played college soccer and just had missed kind of working hard. We run a lot, and I do enjoy running, but just that working hard, and I'm terrible at like making myself work hard. So I was like,
it's much easier to do when you have people.
Yeah. And so I think I'd come across a couple of documentaries on Netflix, more about the games than anything, and I was like, hey Dustin, I'm thinking of like revisiting this CrossFit idea. I'd really like to try it. And then that just kind of led into like the black hole of the internet and like looking at all the things and kind of stumbling across you and your podcast, Pursuing Health and CrossFit Health, and just diving more into that. And then being in the emergency department, you see the after effects, kind of like with transplant surgery, like you're seeing sometimes the end of the road of a lot of lifestyle choices and emergencies stemming from that, or not emergencies, depending on what brought them to the emergency department that day. But just seeing people like fired up about intervening in that and making a change kind of made me excited about medicine again, because just the emergency department can be a hard place. And so we kind of looked up our local box and tried stuff out, and really enjoyed it. And they have childcare, which is a big bonus. And
makes it possible.
Yeah. So you signed up for, I think, October.
The NDO one.
Oh, exciting.
So excited.
Yeah, so we kind of looked, and I got on they had released, I think, 4 dates at the time for 2019, and got on the wait list for that, and got an email, I guess maybe 2-3 weeks ago, that they opened a new October one, and luckily I got a spot there. So we're really pumped about that.
So I think the PT crowd, who all's watching here? Alyssa, that we have a few people from the Game Changers group. So what you just said is the same exact thing that's happening in my world as well. So, I mean, I'm home health, so I'm kind of like way on the end of the spectrum, but even the people in outpatient, if we were to triage people's issues, people may come to see us with low back pain, but their low back pain is not an issue comparatively to their diabetes or, their risk at certain, chronic diseases. And PTs are starting to see that more, but they don't know how to intervene and actually have a big impact. They know how to help with the back pain, but they know that they're, in terms of the trajectory of their quality of life, they may not have impacted it that much. So that fitness forward or health facing, whether it's CrossFit or not, I mean, just getting people to eat better and to move at higher intensities in functional and practical manners, that's like reviving careers for people. And a lot of them, like me, are like, oh, what's this CrossFit stuff? And then and other modes of fitness as well. But it's cool to see that happen with you all as well, because there's so many burnout physicians that are just like, even like the specialists, like, man, this is actually, the kidney doctor is actually saying, well, this is a nutrition problem, but you can always
right, but they
always
don't teach
address
us
it.
that in med school,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's crazy. Like, I was just reading some stats the other day about over the course of, I don't know, the past several decades with drug prescribing going way up, and now we have this kind of mentality of like, if you have a problem, you need a drug to treat it. And with our appointment times getting shorter and more people coming through the ED, we're prescribing more drugs. Patients are less satisfied, and physicians are burning out because it's very unsatisfying. I mean, except for certain conditions where a drug is truly necessary and is the only solution. Like, it's very unsatisfying just to give people drugs and then for them to show up 6 months later, and overall, even though their numbers are in the right spot, they're still sicker than they were 6 months ago.
Right. Yeah, that's a frustrating spot to be in. So let's transition into that lifestyle prescription, because we're all operating in the sick care system. So, we may have limited time with people. We may not. I get to see them a lot. You may, you don't, and Meghan may, depending on the person.
Maybe all the time.
Right.
Every
Sometimes
day.
multiple times a week.
Right, the frequent flyer. So, do you have any words of wisdom when you have this conversation with your patients? Whether it's something that's been helpful or something that you've just bombed and failed and know, I won't do that again. So I know, like, I'll let y'all think about your answer. We'll go through all three of y'all. But like for me, for example, as a home health PT, this isn't necessarily lifestyle prescription related, but when we're doing a falls risk assessment, almost always there's an issue with furniture and rugs. Like, I love your rug here. It's real pretty, and it's a heavy rug, so it stays lower to the ground. But like, so many people have rugs that they'll trip on. And so, I mean, when I first got out of school, I would basically try and rearrange their living room and their bedroom that had been the same way for like 40 years.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, and so, right. So that whole like therapeutic alliance, I was just like some stupid 29-year-old PT just bossed them around, and they wouldn't do anything I said. So when it came time to say, hey, pick up this kettlebell and we're going to do squats, they're like, forget you, man.
Yeah.
I'll swing my stretchy TheraBand around.
Yeah.
So what words of wisdom would you have for the rehab?
So, we were very fortunate enough to be taught a lot of motivational interviewing in residency. And
Do you get any exposure to that in PT?
So now, but when I went to school 10 years ago, wow, we didn't. But now so now you can get that, but it's not. It has to be in the curriculum. But it is a very, very common thing that we'll talk about.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, it's a type of interviewing that is very participatory in terms of involving the patient.
Okay.
So, an example might be, so if we're talking about nutrition, someone's hemoglobin A1C, their average marker of blood sugar over the last 3 months is starting to creep up. Rather than saying, you need to cut out the McDonald's, you need to cut out, the sweets, and I'll see you in 3 months, we'll see if it's changed. You involve the patient, say, okay, what do you think about this number? What ideas do you have? And then you implement those ideas, and you encourage them to implement the ideas that they came up with. And using that style of communication, that style of therapeutic communication, both in nutrition, exercise, pretty much anything, getting them to take their medications.
Right, marriage?
Anything, really. It's
Sometimes he tries to use that.
Like, I know what you're doing.
But it's so powerful. It's so powerful. And I think if you approach it like that, and in doing so, it intrinsically is done in a, even if it's not intentional, it's done in a caring way. Because if you ask, somebody what they think, it's immediately developing a bond with that person. So I think, to answer your question, it's really involving the patient in terms of coming up with ideas and how they perceive their illness.
Yeah.
I think that's a great first step.
Okay, cool. Julie, what would you say?
Yeah, I would just build on that, like finding out what it is that drives that person. And it's not something all the time that you're going to be able to figure out right away in your first interaction. So that's the luxury that we have of getting to see people over time. And what I'm learning that, when I was in my first year, I was trying to get there really fast. But you have a lot of time, and you can see people over months and years and start to develop that relationship. But trying to figure out what drives them and what's going to motivate them to make a change. for example, like just saying, hey, you need to exercise because you know, have diabetes and that's going to help your diabetes. If they don't really care about their diabetes, then they're not going to exercise. But maybe they want to go on a big trip, like hiking with their friend in 3 years after they retire.
Yeah.
Then you use that as a motivation. So it's finding out what drives them. And then in motivational interviewing too, we talk a lot about that no one's going to make any behavior change. And this is true for me. It's true for everyone. And I think about this a lot about why I do the things I do. But you have to, one, believe that it's important for you to change. So if people are, maybe they just don't understand what their disease is and what the possible consequences can be later on. And then they just need more education over time. The second thing is they need to have the confidence that they're able to do it. So a lot of times that's a big hurdle because, you know, maybe they've never exercised in their life and it's so intimidating, like we talked about, even let alone walking into a CrossFit gym, like just going for a walk outside. So trying to help build their confidence and start slow and then build on that over time is way better than trying to ask too much of them too soon.
Yeah.
So making like really small goals and then building on that, I think, has been helpful.
So the ER doc over here, which is just like, this is a terrible question for you. But I mean, what do you think about, what things can you do to maybe even set someone else up down the road? Like how do you think about getting people to change their behaviors?
Yeah. I think so. Trying to, I think, establish, you know, I don't always have the luxury of a return visit. And usually if it is a return visit, it's because we missed something or they just didn't maybe listen that there was nothing there the first time. But I think finding out, like, what was their motivation for coming in today? Like, was it, you know, sometimes it's, well, I think this is going on and I think everyone else has missed it. And, like, being able to just, you know, explain to them, like, why that might not be going on, or just one, figuring out their motivation for, like, why they think it's an emergency. And then once you deem it's not, kind of seeing, like, trying to establish, like, how can I help you going forward? Kind of the same thing, like, you know, what are your, you know, if your goal is to figure out why you've had this abdominal pain for 6 months, like, what resources can I help you figure out? Or, like, a lot of times you're the first person that's told them, like, your blood sugar's too high, like, this isn't normal, but they don't have a primary care doc. Or so in a way you're like almost like a hope stealer, because you're like, by the way, you might have diabetes. But kind of informing them of that, and then kind of talking about where can we go from here, whether that's, you know, getting you in to find somebody or getting you in with someone that can help track these numbers and make interventions, or like, hey, that bronchitis, you're telling me it's getting worse with your every cigarette you smoke, like, maybe now's the time to only do it 4 times today and cut back a little bit. So it's definitely more difficult, and just from that emergent acute care
But I would
standpoint.
say too, and I don't think we talked about it this weekend at the seminar, but some seminars we talk about it, and Greg Glassman has always said, like, the first thing as a coach, like, but above your coaching skills and your cueing and all that stuff, he says, like, the first 3 things you need to be a good coach are care, care, and care. Like, if you care about the person, if you're an emergency room doctor and you care about them enough to talk to them about those things, you know, if you care about them enough to, like, act interested in their life and what motivates them, that is going to go a long way, I think, for, like, developing that therapeutic relationship you talked about, and then helping them be able to make changes.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I don't care. So.
Darn it.
I can't help you.
Yeah, that's what it blows my mind. Yeah, just to see, like, some people in healthcare, you know, like, we are servants, like, we are serving people, but that's not always a mentality. All right, so we talked about, like, the prescription, which I think it's also probably helpful to tell people that, you know, even Julie Foucher over here is not getting people to join a CrossFit gym after the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or even, you know, I think a lot of people think, oh, the CrossFit Health, these doctors are all about CrossFit, they're going to get people in the box. Like, it's not simple, obviously. Like, it's a very complex relationship and whatnot that takes time. So with that being said, you know, that we're talking about the prescription of lifestyle changes or behaviors. There's also a shift in how we are doing that as well, or how we're caring for people. And you can't see it on the camera right now, but we have like a telehealth hub over here at Dani's office. So what is telehealth, and then why are you doing telehealth?
Yeah, so in the broadest terms, telehealth is using technology, either telephone call, video calls, even text messaging, to communicate with patients outside of the office. And it's being implemented pretty much in almost every discipline now, for many, many reasons. Access probably being the biggest one. What I do for a living now is I work for an organization called SteadyMD. What they provide is primary care virtually, completely online. So obviously there's limitations to that. You can't do physical exam, but you have the beauty of being able to communicate with patients on a regular basis. So I have a smaller patient panel size, about 600 patients.
So an hour with each patient, initial evaluation, right?
Right, yeah, initial evaluation, then follow-ups, 30-minute follow-ups, and then patients can communicate with me as much as needed, which sounds daunting if you think about it from a physician perspective. But with a smaller patient panel size and frequent communication, you actually have a very good relationship with folks. And it doesn't become overwhelming from the physician's perspective. And although, like I said, you can't do a physical exam, I'm able to provide care, I think that's equal for a certain subset of patients, but sometimes even better than in-person primary care. I think, honestly, even better. And it's treating a certain subset of folks. So I wasn't aware of this when I was in residency. You think that everyone comes to the doctor, right? And then they see you, and then they come for their physical. I mean, it's a completely utopian view, but there's this whole section of society that never sees a doctor. So if I can provide them some sort of care, virtual, and provide them with guidance, then I think that's better than nothing. And I think it's improving the health of the population.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing, but telehealth in general is being implemented in many, many different ways. So some hospital systems, some practices have in-person visits, then they do their follow-ups virtually. It's very helpful for chronic disease management, things like diabetes, high blood pressure, things of that nature. And then there's a whole other section where consultative services are provided virtually. So let's say you live in a small town. You've got a primary care doc. You don't have a pediatric nephrologist in this small town of 5,000 people. So you can provide that kind of service. Many, many different ways to kind of implement telehealth.
That's interesting. So, and I imagine that's probably being leveraged in your world too.
Yeah, I've mostly used it. Like I work in I rotate through a few different facilities, one being like a smaller community hospital in rural Kentucky, and we'll do like telehealth with like psychiatric evaluations if we're trying to get somebody inpatient, like if they're in a crisis. I've seen it used actually a little bit with stroke medicine as well, where you're just remote and the neurologist kind of takes a look to say like, yes, no, let's use, interventional medicines, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And expect this it already is in the PT world, but it's going to continue to grow as well. So a couple things. So why better than a physical visit? And then the second thing, what was it? Okay, we'll just do the first thing.
In terms of better than a physical visit, it's not like that for every single. So a lot of folks that I see, kind of in between the 30s and 50s, maybe have a new diagnosis of a high blood pressure or insulin resistance, or on their way towards diabetes or pre-diabetes, and we have. It's a situation where intensive lifestyle modification and motivational interviewing can really have a big impact, and where labs can play a big role in the treatment plan and the diagnosis. Those are probably the folks that it's most effective in. But then there's those folks who have really severe chronic diseases too, like people in heart failure, people with even end-stage COPD. If you have the right technology, for example, there's now integrated pulse oximeters that link directly into my electronic medical record. There's blood pressure cuffs that sync with my electronic medical record. Having people weigh themselves if they have heart failure, I can adjust their diuretics from home. All these things that you can do, and you can avoid hospitalizations that way. You can do with the guidance of an in-person doctor as well. So I communicate frequently with specialists. So let's say, again, this person in heart failure with their cardiologist, or maybe even their in-person primary care doc. There's a lot of it's no surprise that there's a lot of like social situations that inhibit people from coming to the doctor, right? So seeing their in-person primary care doctor might involve taking a day off of work. And they're living paycheck to paycheck. It's just, it's an impossibility. It cannot happen. So that's where telehealth can be really effective, and where I can come in and help.
Yeah. And it's been interesting too to see home health agencies adopt some of that technology as well. So not mine, but the agency that some of them that I've seen will have that same technology in terms of the pulse oximeter and weighing people and whatnot, and it communicating with the physician, which is cool. So I'm really excited about that arena. I think we can serve a big group of people, and especially an underserved group of people as well. So with all that being said, so we've talked about, you all have been the traditional medical model. You're, still in the grind, right? Where are you?
Second year of residency.
So middle, second. Yeah. So you're like halfway.
Halfway.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so you've already made it through the hardest part.
The first year, yeah. Was
right.
The hardest.
So she's almost out. We talked about CrossFit Health, and kind of the shift to be fitness forward, and how that could create some ripples, and especially in the medical community. The future of telehealth and how we can leverage some of this technology to influence people and interact with them. So if you don't have to close your eyes, but if you just close your eyes and envision this like really perfect model of what you want to see in terms of a health hub or a wellness hub, what do you see? We may be sitting in it right now, but Joey, what you first, and then
I mean, we can probably answer together because we talk about it all the time. But what we really have realized through our experience with CrossFit is that the community is so powerful, and people's behaviors are so integrated to the people they spend time with, to the communities that they're involved with, and so we really feel like health should be rooted in the community, and we kind of see this future primary care sort of fitness center to be a community center of the future. And that would involve similar CrossFit affiliate, where you have people, but it's welcoming for people of all different backgrounds and it's not intimidating, where you have access to a physician when you need it who can guide you through whatever medical conditions you have, where you have access to a dietitian, to a physical therapist, to health coaches, people who can kind of be with you, that you're going to see multiple times a week, that can help you with those behavior changes, where everyone has this common goal in mind, and then together you're bringing more people into this community to help each other be healthier. I think that's pretty
Would you add anything to that?
No, you nailed it.
Yeah.
But we still need the ER doctors. We still need the surgeons, and that's there's a difference between like what medicine can really do, like or its proper role and its role right now. I mean, there's a big discrepancy. So just where we are right now, Black Flag Athletics. You walk in through the door, boom, fitness first. That's what you see. You see people lifting heavy things, having fun, high-fiving, support, all that stuff. You have to kind of come around to the back corner and see the doctor if you need that type of care. Very lovely couches, and there's gravel on the perimeter, and you're getting a water feature soon. Right?
People are asking for it, I guess.
We're going to have a water feature, and there's a PT clinic in here.
Yeah, connected PT.
Connected PT, so, and then crying babies all over the place. So
care for all ages.
Right, care for all ages.
Yeah.
So this is a model that's already happening, and I think what I think about is we don't have to wait. We don't have to wait for some big change in payment structure or some colossal shift from up high. Like, we can be creative with the spaces that we have now, which is really encouraging.
I agree. If we wait for that, we'll wait forever.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
the change has to come locally from each community.
Love it. All right. Listener questions. They were about functional medicine. So functional medicine, I'm going to let you all describe it. I see your all's name associated with that a lot. So how would you define functional medicine?
Yeah. So functional medicine is, honestly, if I had to put it as plainly as possible, it's just good medicine. It's trying to get to the root cause of an ailment, of an issue, of a symptom.
Yeah.
Okay. I think any doctor, doesn't have to be a functional medicine doctor with training in functional medicine, that's trying to get to the root cause of the issue, is practicing functional medicine. And it's become kind of synonymous with a term where you kind of integrate more lifestyle counseling, therapies, and using different modalities that are not necessarily conventional, but using the best kind of evidence-based modalities from different traditions, from different parts of the world, and then using those to treat that individual, always in the context of trying to get to the root cause. So functional medicine doctors, or people who are trying to get to the root cause, use traditional labs, but they might also use some additional, more, I would say, probably cutting-edge labs, some of which have value, some of which maybe require a little bit more research to be 100% conclusive in being able to provide a diagnosis, but still aid in the diagnostic process. So an example of that would be stool testing, for example, looking at the gut microbiome. That might give some additional insight into kind of total body inflammation, possible sources for some of their chronic conditions, okay? And by addressing those kind of root causes, you can oftentimes get people better. I would argue sometimes even more so than conventional medicine. And functional medicine, in addition to kind of doing more testing and trying to get to the root cause in terms of kind of the underlying physiologic process, couples that with lifestyle. And there's I'd be remiss to say, it'd be bad if I didn't say this, but there's a sense, kind of a therapeutic order where you take, the least potentially harmful therapies, lowest cost first, and you try those, and then you build on top of that. So that would be, sleep, exercise, nutrition, stress management, and I would add kind of community into that piece as well. And using those to try to get people as optimized as possible. And if they still have conditions or issues or symptoms, then you maybe do a little bit more testing. Then maybe you do a little bit more advanced testing. And that's kind of the framework of functional medicine.
Yeah, and we both kind of became interested in this and started learning about it when we were in med school, and they opened a center for functional medicine at our medical school at the Cleveland Clinic, and that was in 2014. And when we both went and heard this lecture by Dr. Mark Hyman, it was the first time we had heard functional medicine explained in kind of this is what it really is, sort of similar to this is what CrossFit really is that we got this weekend. And it was finally something that made sense for us of a way to practice medicine. And one of the models that the Institute for Functional Medicine uses is a tree. So basically you have at the top of the tree all the leaves, which are kind of the symptoms that a person may be having. And then down at the bottom you have the roots, which are what Dani just talks about. Those are your lifestyle factors. Those are like sleep and stress and nutrition and exercise and relationships. And often what we're doing in the conventional world is we're just working up in the leaves. So if someone has a rash, we prescribe them with an anti-inflammatory cream. There's no real question about, let's look deeper into those roots and figure out why does this person have the rash and how can we get rid of that. And so that was what really, I think, appealed to us.
Yeah. So the questions, which I don't know much about functional medicine, but it seems like CrossFit, there's lots of stereotypes, probably inaccurate in a lot of ways. We had two specific questions. So Jason Robinson, Amy DePelto. Jason just took the L1.
Oh,
Awesome.
cool.
And he texted me this morning. He's like, when are we doing the L2? I was like, hold your horses. He said many functional med docs push supplements heavily from what he's seen. What are your attitudes on supplements, and how do you view them when you are prescribing or you're trying to help people?
Yeah, great question. So I'll start with this. I'm not trying to replace a medication list with a supplement list. That's always what I tell people. That's if you have that kind of framework, then I think you're starting off on a good foot. Really, a lot of what the supplements are, they are supplements to the therapeutic process, which always has its foundation in those 5 things that we talked about: the sleep, exercise, nutrition, all that stuff. If we're not able to make changes, or if they have a particular issue that isn't amendable to those 5 different interventions, then you'd use a supplement, a very targeted supplement that's, again, evidence-based.
Yeah.
Isn't just, I heard this thing or read this thing on a blog. Yeah. I mean, I think what's happened is, there are certain practitioners, and this is universal in all medicine, right? That just kind of, they kind of get derailed a little bit, and they start prescribing things that aren't necessarily, don't necessarily make sense or have a lot of evidence. And then people end up getting a lot of supplements as a result of that. But I do want to bring this up though. When I say evidence-based, the Institute for we went to a couple conferences for the Institute for Functional Medicine, and they provided this really cool diagram that I always think about. And they kind of describe evidence-based medicine as using 3 different things: the scientific literature, the practitioner's clinical experience, and patient preference. And that's evidence-based.
Yeah.
Because it includes all those different things. It includes what the patient actually wants to do, which is probably the single most important thing, and then what you've seen happen, what's worked, and then what the literature supports. And if you've gone to any of the CrossFit health conferences and learned about the problems with research nowadays, you might be happy. You might be happy that we have those 2 other things to rely on. But we kind of got derailed there. But that's that's how we use supplements. Yeah.
Yeah, and you think about, at the end of the day, it's a lot of this is all self-experimentation. It's that N1 experiment. When you're talking about nutrition or you're talking about certain supplements, it's you want to change one thing at a time and see, is it actually making a difference in the person in a positive way? And if it is, then great. If not, then it's probably not worth it.
Yeah, and I think the PTs that are watching or listening to this could benefit from that right there in terms of changing one element of our programs. Because a lot of times we'll throw 18 different types of activities or exercises, but only have one functional measure, like a timed up and go, for example, to be like, is this actually working or not? But you don't know what's working. So tweaking as few variables as possible. Well, that's good stuff. So Jason also, he asked, what's your all's perspective of genetic testing? Do you leverage it at all? Does that help you inform your interventions?
I think we're at a place now where we have the technology to sequence people's genomes for cheap, at least certain stretches of our genes. But we don't necessarily have all the data to know what they mean. So in some situations, some very particular genetic mutations have clinical significance. We know the impact on the disease process or kind of how it affects treatment. But a lot of these things, SNPs, for example, SNP, are small single kind of letter changes in the DNA, but that can potentially have an impact on a person's physiology. But there's so many different variations of that, and we're able to pick up all these different variations. We don't necessarily know we don't know what they mean. But what happens is a lot of people have access to that information. They see these SNPs, they see these differences in their genetic code, and they get concerned. They're like, oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? And at this point, the data only allows us to make associations. And oftentimes, it doesn't even let us know what we can do about it. So although genetic testing is available, and in certain situations it's quite helpful, I don't think we're at a stage now, or quite yet, where we can say, everyone should get their genome sequenced so that it's kind of like a 5th vital sign or so. But
yeah, I agree. I think there are some interesting things now. It's still just so early, but interesting things as far as nutrition, and there's this whole field of nutrigenomics and trying to use your genome to figure out what is the optimal nutritional prescription for you. And so I think, people can geek out on that a lot. And there is, especially for certain people, there are things that you may want to change. But at the end of the day, I think it's that real life experiment, because our genes tell us the code, but it's the inputs that we put in, it's the environment, the nutrition, all the things that we're doing that affects the expression of those genes. And so, experimenting and finding out what works best for you, I think is still the gold standard way to do it.
And starting with those 5 things that we talked about, right? Once you've dialed, once you're getting 9 hours of sleep and you're eating well, then maybe it makes sense to dig a little bit deeper, with more testing, including genetic testing.
People don't want to do that though. They want
I want a quick fix.
I love the analogy of if you have a big jar, first you have to put big rocks in, right? So those are the sleep and the nutrition and the stress and all that stuff. Once those are in, then you can start putting in the smaller pebbles. So that might be some extra lab testing. It might be little details like timing of food intake and that sort of thing. And then after that, you can fill in the sand. And that's when you start looking at supplements or maybe genetic testing or maybe more advanced testing. But there's still a few people who already have all the rocks in place and all the pebbles in place. Most of the time people come in and they're still eating like McDonald's or they're eating ice cream 3 times a week and not sleeping because they're so stressed out and they want to do all these extra things.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's work on the biggest impact stuff first.
Yeah. And so that resonates with me as well, and a lot of people watching and listening, because you all see this all the time too. Like there's this new fad or some sexy intervention that's brand new, cutting edge, like, probably, DNA testing and all that fun stuff. But like in our world, like a lot of people just need to get stronger, like they need that type of stressor before we start to do all these crazy exercises, staying on these crazy surfaces and doing all these different things. Like what are the big rocks for and it's going to be different for each patient, but there are some big rocks that are consistent to human beings. So I like that.
Right,
so,
and it's not always fun, right? Like,
no.
like you said, it's hard work, it's consistency, it's like the daily grind of like making your food and doing the squats or the whatever exercises that are so boring. Like whatever it is, it's not always going to be so exciting, but that's the stuff that really makes a difference.
Yeah, I think remember it was like the second or third workout that we went to at the CrossFit box, or it was later than that. It was like a few weeks in, and we were all talking after the Metcon at the end, and everyone's like, "Oh, that was terrible," and I was like, "Man, that hurt." Like that, not like painful way, but like, man, that was very challenging. And this guy, he's probably like mid-40s or something like that. He's just a badass in every sense of the word, but he just looks at me and goes, "It doesn't get easier, you just get better." And he just walks off. And like that is like resonate with me. It won't get easier. Like get that out of your head. Like all this stuff doesn't get easier, but you get better. You get more fit on that continuum that you mentioned. And I freaking love that. Yeah. So all right. Well, I want to be respectful of your all's time. It's been a long weekend. So one last question. So you're talking to mostly PTs. There may be some OTs and speech therapists and whatnot in here, but mainly PTs, PTAs. When you write that script, PT, eval, and treat, what is one thing that you want that PT to do, or one characteristic that you want them to have? So you'll start with you, and then we'll end with Dani. Or we don't have to start with you.
I would say, I feel like I had like a win on a shift if I like refer somebody to PT. I thought I was getting Percocet.
It's close to home, It's like I would just say this is really simple and basic, but just talk to the doc, communicate with the doc. I would love to get a phone call.
You would?
Yeah.
You don't want a fax of 25
He's
pages?
also the guy with 600 pages.
Yeah.
I don't know if every person would say that.
And let me tell you why. For that reason, 15 forms for me to look through and like remember what the acronyms mean. It's a big. I'm like, dude. I mean, like, they're getting better. They're not getting better. But no, if in a perfect world, I would love and maybe this is in there. I don't know, but like a little blurb that says patient is doing well. This is what you as the medical provider can keep an eye out for, just so there's some sense of communication so that we're on the same page. I just like talking to people, on the phone. I think that's really helpful because then you can kind of have a little bit of
not a millennial.
Yeah.
Could you just shoot me a text?
Just text me before you call, and then I may answer.
But what I mean is, some sense of dialogue.
Yeah.
Where we trained, at the Cleveland Clinic, we had a really nice staff messaging system, and I'd love it when I get messages from the PT and they're like, "Oh, Mrs. Smith is doing great right now. We're on this. This is what the plan is for the next 2 weeks." Boom! It's like 3 sentences, and now I know what's going on. I can talk to Mrs. Smith when I see her next week and ask her if she's doing the exercises, how those are going.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing, just communicating back and forth, and then of course doing functional movements.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just no brainer.
Which is not common. So.
Yeah, which is
we're working on that on our end. But the communication piece, that as a home health clinician, which you all see this, but in our world, the stereotype of that is a lot of people don't want to do that. A, because it's with older adults. You're going into who knows what type of home, which can be kind of fun. But the documentation, our documentation is just absurd. Yeah. And so monthly assessments, every 60 days we do this recertification. And what you get faxed, I don't even want to see the end product. I mean, I can't even imagine how long it is. And there is that little blurb that you
Somewhere
want
in
to
there.
see, but it's towards the end. And it's written in a way that's not for you, but for Medicare A or whatever third-party payer to have us speak in this way that you may not necessarily understand. Now, granted, I know a lot of the people in management, they're going to watch, it's like, well, Dustin, you can do the blah, 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 blah. You know, like, documentation can be helpful. And I understand that, and we could all be better at documentation, but when you've got a full-time therapist, a full-time caseload, and you are expecting them to write in a certain manner to please all parties involved, like that, not to say it can't be done, but it's hard for a lot of people. So y'all can complain about that later on for the PT crowd. So yeah, communication. So what would be yours?
So I would just say, I'll echo on the functional movements, but I would say, like, you are probably going to have a lot more contact with the patient, like, so over that short period of time, maybe seeing them weekly or maybe even more frequently than that. If you're, I guess, in more of an outpatient, I don't know. It depends on the setting.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
You're definitely going to have more contact, and you're going to be with them for a long period of time while they're doing these exercises. So I think, like, one of the biggest things for me is that everyone in healthcare is working with this same goal in mind of trying to help people get healthier. And so often there's time where, one, by us setting an example first of, you know, showing health and not eating, like, drinking soda while we're in front of patients and, like, all that sort of stuff. But two, it's like, use that time to talk with the patient about what else they could do to help be healthier. Teaching them exercises that they can continue to do, whether it's for that specific problem or something like, hey, you know, what do you normally do for exercise? What could you start doing after you graduate from PT? So that it's not like it's just you fix one problem and then it ends there and then they stop moving. And I'm sure that's what you guys are always trying to do and trying to focus on. But, like, I think if everyone on the healthcare team is constantly reinforcing that, it can be a lot more powerful. Because just in one conversation, it may seem like you're getting nowhere, but if they're hearing it from multiple places, eventually it might help.
Right. I think that brings up a great point of us setting each other up for success. You know, like, even say I do an initial evaluation, I think speech is going to be helpful. It has a big impact on potentially the outcomes of speech therapy based on, you know, how I set them up. Like, oh yeah, Julie's going to come in. You know, she may get you to remember some things, whatever. It's cool. You need to squat more. But or versus, like, Julie's going to come in. She's awesome. She's going to help you be sharper, and you know, these tasks will become easier. Like, she's great. She's awesome. Everyone loves her. Like, that impacts, you know, the outcomes, and we can all do that with the people that we.
The power of suggestion is so we have a faculty member who teaches us all about that, and it really it is. The more you can try to spin it positive and say, I think you're going to do so great with this. I think you're going to feel a lot better. I think, you know, the patient that works.
Yeah.
Like that has a lot of impact.
Yeah, the whole therapeutic process in general is healing in general.
That's beautiful. All right, ER doc. Think about the 3 PT scripts that you've written.
Hey, I will say, having a PT father, husband, and sister-in-law, I refer to PT a lot more than most of my colleagues. But I would say, kind of echo a little bit on what Julie said of kind of on your end. Like, I can tell them, like, hey, this is what's going on, or what I think is going on. I want you to see PT. Come back for X, Y, or Z. You know, if these red flags kind of turn up. But I think reiterating that from, like, the end of your therapy, you know, sessions as well, of like, hey, if this starts, here's how you can head it off. Or if this comes back, come back and see us. Or if these things happen, go to the ER. I think reiterating some of those things, and along the lines of communication, making sure you're communicating for the right person. Because I think some of the people I remember I referred a girl to PT, and I'm at 3 different locations, and my shifts are all over the place. And I think 2 months later, got some paperwork of, like, signing off for more PT sessions for this girl who actually went, that I was pumped about, but I was like, I'm not going to sign this stuff. Like, I'm not following her, you know. So trying to communicate with the PT, or with their primary, if they have one, hopefully. And I would say, lastly, don't judge me for getting that imaging, because I get paid to rule out worst case scenario.
It's so true.
And that's a trend in our world in terms of seeing, you know, how imaging in some cases can be harmful in some cases, you know, or it may not be it may not impact the actual interventions. But yeah, like you're paid to worry. You're paid to think worst case scenarios. Like that's your job, and you have to rule things out. Well, good stuff. All right. I'm very thankful for y'all sticking around and talking to me. There's a lot of things. I'll probably mention this. I'll record a little bit later, but I just want the PT crowd to think about how they think about their patients and the emphasis on communication, but the emphasis on fitness, on lifestyle decisions that we can all make. First of us actually acting on them and displaying them ourselves. But then, this is the way forward. This is how we're going to make a big impact in a huge problem that we have. It's not by, the way of the past, but by being fitness forward, or facing fitness instead of, the pill or the knife or, ultrasound or Easton, whatever. Good stuff. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Super fun.
All right. Lucy, good job.
Much.
Good job.
Thanks for falling asleep at the very end.
There you have it, folks. Julie Foucher, Dani Urcuyo, Meghan Jones, Lucy Lenore. Awesome conversation. I really enjoyed that, and I hope you all gained a lot of insight into the heads of a physician, of a practicing physician, and also thinking about how you can be more fitness facing, how we can implement fitness into our treatment sessions, into our plans of care, and to really see the importance of that and to see the shift towards really looking at that whole person and not just addressing their low back pain or their shoulder pain or some of these specific deficits, but having a broader view of what is really kind of the triage list of these individuals, the big rocks, like Julie said. What do these people need for health and not just for their back to feel better? That's something I'm thinking about all the time now, especially as I'm talking to more and more people that are incorporating these principles. So I just really appreciate their perspective. To contact or to follow along their journeys on social media, there'll be links in the show notes for this. That can be found at seniorrehabproject.com, but juliefoucher.com. So Juliefoucher.com is where you can find links to all of Julie's social media accounts, the online training that she does, but also the Pursuing Health podcast. So juliefoucher.com. Go there, check it out. Awesome site, lots of helpful information. SteadyMD.com is where you can find Dani. That's where you can see kind of what he's up to and also how you could work with him if you would like. He's also active on Instagram at DaniUrcuyo MD. So Dani Urcuyo MD. Obviously, the links are going to be in the show notes. My wife does not want you to follow her, and Lucy Lenore does not have an online presence yet. So, yeah, appreciate it. If y'all have any questions, hit me up. Really enjoy this conversation. Hope to bring more of these types of conversations to y'all. Have a good one.